My name is Gibson. I'm an alcoholic. So, I'll tell you a little about my story. I grew up in a town right outside of Washington, D.C., in Maryland. And I feel like a lot of people, when they, share a story, they said, like, there's something traumatic happened in their, childhood. And for me, it was quite the opposite. Nothing bad happened. I had loving parents, it was really, I grew up a pretty happy kid, and there was never, like, from what I remember, it just all seemed pretty good. And it's not even like other people say, like, I always felt different. That's not even the case either for me. Like, it may have just been ignorance, but I felt pretty normal, compared to everyone else. And so I had, 3 good friends in elementary school growing up, who I was really close with. Middle school, my best friend at the time left to go to a different school, and that was uncomfortable, because I didn't really know who to hang out with. The other 2 people I hung out with, they left, they just went to different groups, so I didn't really have any friends. And I hung out with these people, and they didn't treat me well. I guess the terminology today would be gang bullied, but I remember just feeling like my parents gave me lunch money, and they would like, hey Gibson, we'll let you sit here if you buy me food. And of course I bought them food. I wanted to sit with them. I was willing to sacrifice my dignity for acceptance. I didn't see it like that back then. That, obviously I feel like I was still ignorant to, really what was going on at that point. But I went through middle school, and it kind of sucked. And then I entered high school, and high school is kind of where it kind of just all kind of takes off. 9th grade, I went to the big high school, and all my good friends had left. They all had, I knew no one. I mean, obviously I knew some people, but I didn't have any friends. And I didn't know what to do. So the obvious choice was to escape it all and go to a private school. So I went to a school that had 60 kids in it. And I knew everyone at that school. It doesn't mean I was friends with them all, but I knew everyone, so I knew what everyone did. And I had heard people talking about, about weed and drinking and stuff. But I had drank before that, just trying, a little liquor or something, and it was disgusting. I was like, so there must be something better. So weed sounded like the next logical choice. So at the end of my 9th grade year, I was on the bus with this girl that was a senior at the time, and she was like, we were talking about drugs to an extent, and she was like, so you smoked weed before? I was like, oh yeah, all the time, yeah. I had never smoked weed before. And she was like, I was like, let's smoke sometime. She was like, cool, hit me up. And then, like a week or 2 later, I called her and was like, let's hang out. And then I told my dad, okay, I'm just going, I'm going downtown, I don't know, to Barnes & Noble or something like that. And my dad was like, okay, cool. I think he was like, why were you going to Barnes & Noble? you don't have friends. But I had, and I remember the feeling distinctly that on the bus ride over there, there was fear. There was fear, and that was like, I wonder what this is gonna be like. I've never done this before, but I was excited. I was really excited, and I went and smoked weed with her. And, I could go into my first high story, but I don't know if that would be beneficial. It was, but I remember after it, and it was one of those experiences of like, this is the greatest thing in the world. This makes me feel amazing. Why have I not known about this, and why am I not continuing to do this every day? So so it just kind of started, I started smoking weed, it's just the progression that everyone hears of, a little bit. And then, I was trying to smoke every day. I didn't always, first of all, I was, I think, 15 at the time. Yeah, I was 15. I didn't have a job, I couldn't buy weed. So obviously I stole money from my parents' purse, or my mom's purse. And that wasn't like my parent. There wasn't enough there for every night like to go and get get weed. So I had to be creative. I started putting my ADHD pills up my nose. And that didn't get me high. It just kind of made me feel really focused and want to get shit done. Of the most attractive drugs now, that sounds pretty good. I'd like to get some homework done, but I remember, and then there were like other things. I could just go to the store and steal Robitussin, that it's an awful high. It's the worst, but it got me high, so like all these things kind of started to pile up. And I needed, and my parents started to figure out and started to catch on, and they realized that that something had to be done. So they signed me up for an intensive outpatient IOP. So and obviously the IOP didn't work too well because that's where I learned of spice. So I was being drug tested at the time, and so I couldn't smoke weed, and I didn't want to go through the whole thing of like having to time out the drug test because that sounded more miserable than, staying sober. So I learned about spice, and obviously I was ignorant to that and didn't know what that was. I thought it was like weed where I could smoke that as much as I wanted, and I ended up at school and I smoked a lot of it, and I ended up overdosing, and had to. They called the ambulance, and I like it wasn't the greatest way to get kicked out of school by being taken out on a stretcher. And it was like at that time, drinking was constant. But it wasn't. It was my parents didn't really know about that because it was easy to hide. Weed is a lot harder to hide because I was too scared to go out of my house, so I would just kind of like smoke out the window, and that doesn't work very well. So after that, I got sent to a wilderness program, and it was in upstate Maine. And I was there for 12 weeks. And I mean, looking back on it, it was great. It was a great experience. I needed it. But that wilderness will not keep you sober. It doesn't. You're in the woods. You're not having real life experience. It's not a long-term solution. So I went. I did the whole wilderness thing. Came home, relapsed wilderness again, in the winter in Maine, which is miserable, as you can imagine. And then I got sent to a boarding school and got kicked out of there and came out here for treatment. This was a little more than 3 years ago. And so I was 17 at the time. And and treatment was one of the hardest things I had done, because keep in mind, they could hold me there as long as I wanted because I was underage. So I ended up going through treatment and being there for almost 13 months. And it was really, really difficult. But the thing that treatment center did was introduce me to AA. I had been to some AA meetings before, but hadn't really seen the benefit of it. It's like, this is just weird. This was the first time where I had seen people who were my age come into the program, who I still see in these rooms today, and talk to me, and talk to us, about staying sober. And so it was a logical choice. I went to transitional after that, and so I started going to some meetings. I went to the meetings that they brought us to, like the Foothill group, and I started doing that. I started meeting some people, and I got a sponsor. And then I started working some steps and kind of, started to just kind of slow down. I was happy with the fellowship. Just the fact that people treated me with respect and were nice to me and truly appreciated my company was good enough for the time. And I was okay staying in that place, not doing all three parts of this program. And I relapsed. It wasn't an awful relapse. It wasn't, compared to everything else, it wasn't that bad. And I was out for about 2 months and then came back, and I went to SWACYPAA Tucson, and that was my first conference ever. And this was a truly spiritual experience where I was like, people are in these rooms dancing and having fun and enjoying people's company and not fucked up. And that scared the shit out of me. But I saw people doing it and people telling me to dance with them and everything, and I was like, okay, I'll do it, even though I was incredibly scared. And at the end of that, I was filled with this spark. I was like, I want this. This is what I want to do. So I got back in, and I kept working with the sponsor that I was with, and put some service in my life. Got service positions. And then and I had my fellowship that was still growing, and had that spark and wanted to keep going with the with the steps, but didn't really go too far on those. It was work, and I don't like to do work. And so time went by, and you don't do your steps, I didn't do my steps, so I ended up relapsing again. And this was much shorter, but this was like 2 nights of drinking, at parties. And that was kind of cool because I'd never been to a party and people were kind of cool and I was drunk. But then, there were consequences to that. I lived in a house with my 2 best friends to this day, and they figured out, and I had to move out. I was given a month. And that was really difficult. I was scared and didn't know what to do. And I was definitely bummed out. I was like, okay, well, it seems like this could work. Those me going to parties and drinking, I had fun. Nothing got really bad, Why can't I keep doing this? So the plan in my head was move out of the house, and then, I'll keep drinking. And then I went to SWACYPAA this last year, and I hung out with some people, and I really bonded with them, and realized that, on the way back, it was a beautiful drive, and just kind of started bawling, and I was like, this is really where I belong. And that was May 15th of last year, and that's been my sobriety date. And I knew what I had to do. There was no question of well, do I do this? No, I knew I had to do my steps. I had to get service, and I needed to build my fellowship. I'd seen what I was missing in the past, and knew what I had to implement. Got a new sponsor. Involved myself into rigorous service, and really I did what I had to do. And so fast forward a little bit, and I'm working my 12 steps, and I get to 4, 5, 6, 7, though that chunk. And I remember doing 5, 6, 7, and doing the prayer, and doing the hour meditation after, and that I sat there, and I got back in the car with my sponsor, and I was like, I feel lighter, physically lighter, because I remember every time I took a drink or smoked some weed, it would feel like the weight physically weight being taken off of me, and then and so when I felt that without drinking or using or doing whatever, this was one of those things of this is working. There's a lot of stuff I did by working my steps that I did very wrong. I sat on my 4th step for a while. I'm still somewhat sitting on my 9th step. But this program has really given me a way of life I could never imagine. This conference right now has been the most spiritual conference I've ever been to. I am walking around the halls after the main meeting, and I see people, and usually I'm very, very judgmental, and just it's easier that way, to judge, just to judge people, but I'm walking around seeing people, and people I don't even know, people who seem like they're struggling, and feel this extreme love towards them. And it's a feeling I can't even really describe, but it fills me with such joy and happiness that I could never expect from using. I believe that this could never happen from taking a drink. I'm at a conference with people that are my age, and we're all having fun. But most of all, I'm with these people that have gone through the same thing as me. And in the end, that's a bond that that even if I don't know them, it's a bond that is, that's bigger than really anything, any other type of relationship you would have with someone. It's not about the type of music you like. This isn't about what movies you like. This is, about the thing that we were dead inside, and we found a way out through the same program, and we know this. I'm really happy, to be here and to share at least a little bit of my story. I feel like, 20 minutes is not enough, for me to really go in depth. But, I feel like if I pass something on, that's, I did my job. But yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.